it is way too difficult to change who you are. Like if you're not an entrepreneurial person, get a job, right? If you
Right.
are miserable in a job, like try this entrepreneurship shit out. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
this is even worse. Go back to a job. Like
Yeah.
knowing who you are and what drives you is way more important than finding out what is the hot thing at the time or the cool thing. Find out who you are.
Welcome to the Patrick Real Estate Show, where we explore the fascinating world of real estate investing with your host, Patrick Switek. Patrick is a dynamic young entrepreneur and an accomplished real estate investor who's passionate about helping others achieve financial freedom. Each week, we sit down with some of the most inspiring individuals in the real estate industry and delve into their personal journeys, lessons learned, and secrets to their success. Let's dive into this week's episode.
Adam Gilbert, welcome to the Patrick Real Estate Show. Man, I've been wanting to get you on for a minute, but I know you're just a busy guy doing big deals in Palm Springs. It's hard to get you on. No, all jokes. But for the people that don't know Adam is my broker on the real estate side. Not only that, but he does a lot of commercial real estate deals currently in Palm Springs. He's pretty much like the king of Palm Springs when it comes to real estate. He knows everybody and just an awesome, just all around awesome guy. Has helped us tremendously throughout the acquisition of the new management company that we had. And also just through and through, just being a really good sounding ear for a lot of things when it comes to property management, because his background was not only is he a lawyer background, but also does a lot of real estate, and he sold his property management company that he had back in the day to Turnkey. So he's an all-around guy. He knows everything. If there's anybody to talk to about anything property management and real estate related, it's him. I'm excited to have him on. Adam.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about a bunch of stuff, and I love these things because I always learn more about you. You learn more about me, and like, oh, I didn't know you did that. So
Yep.
let's just hit it and start talking about some stuff because I think we got a lot of fun things to share with everyone.
Amazing. Yeah. So let's talk about your background a little bit more deeper. Like, how did you get into real estate to begin with? Where did you start? Give me a
Yeah.
rundown.
I never intended to be in real estate. I'm a third generation attorney in my family, and I grew up in Palm Springs back at a time after the cool spring break Palm Springs and before this kind of Palm Springs renaissance. So, like the doldrum years. But I grew up in Palm Springs, and then I moved back in. Fast forward 2011, I had just graduated law school, just sat for the bar. And when I passed the bar, I started working as a lawyer. And in California at the time, if you were a licensed attorney, you could just sit for the broker's exam because they assumed that you had the education requirements. So I did that. My uncle, who was my boss at the time, you should do that and get that license. And so I was like, all right. So I did that. And then now I'm a real estate broker. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but it was 2012 at that point, and it was that we're coming out of the bottom of the great financial crisis. And my uncle said, hey, I want to buy a house. Let's flip a house. Like the prices look pretty good. So I didn't know what I was doing, but he was my first client. Family is always a great place to start when you're getting into real estate. And I fumbled my way through my first transaction. Luckily, the other agent was amazingly kind, and I'm sure just grateful to do any deal at that time. And about 10 hours later, 10-hour work hours, I got a check for 20 grand for representing him on this deal. And I'm like, holy shit, this is 25% of my yearly lawyer salary. So that's when the light bulb went off, and I was like, okay, there's something to this like real estate thing. And then I can go into a million stories about how I dove in and got into development and investing and capital raising and all sorts of property management. I just went down the rabbit hole of real estate and consumed all the information and anything that I could to learn more.
Yeah. So when did you start? What year was that?
That was
Or,
2012.
or 2012, got it. But you've been doing it since 2012. When did you start your brokerage though?
So, because I had sat for the broker's exam, with zero experience, I was a broker. And so I never worked for anyone else. I never worked under anyone. And I just hung my shingle and figured it out. The first company I ever had was called Pop Real Estate Group, because me and my friends had a thing about POP, positive outlook personality. We had all these acronyms and stuff. So it's Pop Real Estate Group. I started putting my face in magazines and said, I think my tagline was like, why just have a broker when you could also have a lawyer? And I just put it, I put it out there, and I started small. I started selling, representing people on little $300,000 houses, but I built my business on the side as I practiced law, so that when I made the leap, I had a book of business, because it does take a couple of years to really get going, to be able to make a living in this business, on at least on the brokerage side.
Yeah, absolutely. And so why not go down the law path? Was it because of monetary exclusively, or did you just not find the passion for it, or like what really drove you into real estate more so than law?
Yeah, with law, one, it was fine. I was never really, I didn't love the
Yeah.
law, as they say. The first
Yeah.
question, do you love the law? No, like I don't really care. I was a trial
Yeah.
attorney and did some of that stuff, so that was fun. But I also have severe ADD. I don't know if you could tell. And the
Oh yeah.
uh, sitting at a desk all day was just like
It's a lot.
not it for me. Like by the end of this interview, I'm going to be like freaking out. And that's what I liked about it, is that I do not have an adversarial personality, and to do litigation, it's very adversarial.
Mm.
I was 25 years old. I was a 60-year-old attorney who's just like screaming in my ear all day. I'm super collaborative. And so what I found, and once I dove into learning more about real estate and the opportunities, that there was really no limitation in terms of how much money, how many projects you could do. You could keep exponentially growing, whereas I didn't feel that there was the same way in the law to be able to
You
do
know,
that.
I also have ADD, and so I feel like I can't sit when I do these podcasts. It's really tough for me, to be honest. But I can understand the fact that like the variety of real estate is very enticing, to be honest. To be able to
Yeah.
do like commercial property management, you could do so many things, which is so cool. Now, granted, so you started this brokerage, right? Where did property management come into play? You were in Palm Springs. Palm Springs is a huge vacation rental market. Curious how you went into that and what made you really want to do property management.
Definitely. At the time, call it 2008 to 2011, was this like tech renaissance, and you have all these businesses opening up and crowdfunding and all these kind of things. So it's like tech was really the big thing. So I'm on TechCrunch. I'm doing like a side thing, even in law school, doing a startup with my buddies, blah, blah, blah. We're going to go to Y Combinator and do all these things. My brain, I took a programming class at a community college while in law school to try to, well, my brain doesn't work that way. So, but I was trying all these things, right? It was all those efforts. So being on TechCrunch every day, I heard about this new thing called Airbnb in 2011 or so.
Wow.
And my wife she got a job over the summer in New York, was when I was studying for the bar. So I was studying for the bar, she was working. And then afterwards, we traveled all throughout the East Coast. So we stayed at this row house in DC in someone's bedroom. And I remember it was like they like checked us in and gave us the room, and that was super weird. I was like, this is the future, this is it. And so when I moved back to Palm Springs, like no one was on the platform, because usually Palm Springs is pretty far behind. And it was before like a vacation rental culture. There was companies, but it was before the real tech implementation of it. So I just got on the platform. Again, I had an uncle, he had a couple condos, threw the condos on Airbnb. And then because I was so early to the platform, the algorithm at the time loved me. So any property that I had and put on would just go to the top. And I saw my numbers. I was doing easily 20 to 30% better than anyone else on that platform, because I was so early. And so my properties would just go to the top, and I had great ratings and all that kind of stuff. So that's how it started. And then I was managing like 2 or 3 properties, and then I was like, oh, okay, I've got the maids, I've got the handyman, and then I just built a business off of that as I got more and more customers. By the end in 2018, I think we had 35 full-time rentals, 15 50 or 60 total for festival season. And we had great clients. I had Kings of Leon and the Mighty Ducks came for Stagecoach and rented out a bunch of our houses in
Wow.
Montage. And so we're in some of these places like super early. And so it was just it was fun, but by that time, it was a lot of work, and I had to decide, do I go down the entire property management route, or do I go down more the brokerage investment route? And I decided to go down that route, so I sold the company, used those funds to start my investments, and the rest there is kind of history.
Wow. And now you're doing crazy commercial deals. Telling me about, yeah, you're getting into storage units now. Like you just
Yeah.
talked to me about it before
Mhm.
the show. So that's crazy. But I want to backtrack a little bit. So when you were doing Airbnb back then, walk me through how different was it back then than it is now? Like, how was it did you do brand new design, or did you just throw up like anything and it worked, or just walk me through
Yeah.
that?
So in those early days, two factors. One, in terms of design, like there was so much demand because people
Hmm.
had heard about this platform and not enough supply or good supply. The traditional vacation rental companies out here did not want to go on that platform because they didn't want to pay the fees and have to do that.
Interesting.
Like they were used to just getting calls. And so you had a couple thousand units and they were all going through phone and even just their own internal website. And so that was one factor. So you didn't really need to stand out from the crowd as much. The ones that did obviously did way better, but there wasn't as much competition as there is today. Secondly, it was the Wild West in terms of municipal regulation in cities. Like it was like a new thing. And we had a ton of properties in Palm Desert. And now there are no properties in Palm Desert and Rancho Mirage and Indian Wells and La Quinta. I had a ton of properties in La Quinta. One of the reasons why I decided to sell the company in 2018 is I saw the writing on the wall that we had some cities banning it or creating like really harsh regulations. There were ballot initiatives to end it. And so I was like, okay, the industry is going to be changing substantially. I could either flow through with those changes, which would have been fine. And actually, there was probably some consolidation opportunities as people like left the market, but it was going to be a different world, much more regulated. Like we barely had TOT receipts and things, and there was no fining it was really the Wild West. And I remember working with a lot of the early organizations to work with the cities to be like, look, we want to be good neighbors. We want to be part of the community. We want to pay our fair share. Don't just make some rules without discussing with us as to whether or not it's going to be feasible for us to actually do and implement.
So for the people that don't know Palm Springs, can you talk a little bit about why people go to Palm Springs and what kind of crowd of people usually come through, the guest avatars?
Yeah, so Palm Springs itself is a resort community like 100 miles east of Los Angeles. And it has been a popular getaway since the 20s and 30s because at that time, the movie stars had a clause in their contract that they could only be 100 miles away from the studio in case they needed to do a reshoot. So they would go to Palm Springs. And then at that time, mid-century modern architecture became a thing and it was super cool. Fast forward through the 70s and 80s, it's a spring break destination and all of the teenagers are going, look up the Palm Springs YouTube, 1980s spring break, pretty wild stuff. But then there was one crazy spring break and they shut it down. And along with that, the tourism dried up. But today, Palm Springs is very different. When I moved back around 2011, 2012, it was just like the early seeds of, a cool restaurant's opening up here. And it was the hipsters at the time, like the LA artsy crowd, the creatives started coming to Palm Springs. There was a huge LGBT movement from about early 2000s from San Francisco where they come and remodel mid-century homes. And so it's just this super diverse, interesting people, small town. We have 45,000 full-time residents and 5 million visitors. And so it's just wild to think that a town of 45,000 people has international airport, major events like Coachella, Stagecoach, Film Festival, tennis tournaments, and that's just the greater Coachella Valley overall. But it really is like this just microcosm community, and it's a 2-hour drive from San Diego, Orange County, LA. Scottsdale's like 4, Phoenix is like 4 hours. So you have all these like different areas that are just a hop, skip, and a jump that are very wealthy. So there's a lot of wealth here.
There you go. So I think a lot of wealth came in as well.
Mhm.
So great. So you're in this great position. Obviously, Airbnb is in a place. 2018 comes, and so now you're looking to sell. You see the writing on the wall. Walk us through how do you structure the sale? Did you find Turnkey? Did they find you? How did you go about getting that exit?
Yeah, and so I didn't really know what I was doing at that time, but I was like, look, we're here. There's also some other external factors. My wife had just gotten elected to the city council in Palm Springs, and vacation rentals are probably the most contentious issue at the time. So just let's get this thing. So I just put a couple of birdies out there to people who I knew were connected. Wyndham had just done this major acquisition of Palm Springs vacation rentals for I think like 40 million or something at the time. A crazy number. And so I was like, okay, so I put it out there. Turnkey had just gotten a bunch of venture funding out of Austin. And so they were trying to come into smaller markets. And then I had one local company that or two local companies that potentially wanted to just take on our inventory. And so I just put some birdies out there and then set up some phone calls and then got connected to the acquisition team and then started preparing documents like, hey, this is our inventory, this is our income, this is what we can expect. But management companies are interesting to value, right? Especially short-term vacation rental property management, as I'm sure you found out, because the contracts, they're not ironclad, right? If someone decides to sell their house 2 months after you acquire them, they can do that and their contract is no longer valid. And so in terms of valuation, a lot of it is based on the relationships that you've built with those people. So is this company well suited to come in and foster those relationships? Like we provided a very high-end boutique level service. If you needed something, you could call me and I would make sure that it would get done. When we went to Turnkey, it wasn't like that anymore. Like you call a rep who's getting paid hourly and who knows what the hell. So thinking about those factors of who is acquiring your company is definitely something that I learned and am now able to share knowledge with people like you of the best way to do that. But yeah, it just happened organically. And luckily at that time, a lot of people saw a huge growth coming to the vacation rental market, which did happen. And so they were willing to give some nice valuations at the time.
Yeah. I'm going to be asking questions about this, but if there's anything you don't feel you can't share, just let me know. I'm not going to be offended.
My NDA is long expired.
Oh, really? Okay. Perfect. Then let's go. Let's get the cannons out. Let's do it. No, you're a lawyer. At least you can understand it at a higher level than most people. Now, granted, how do you prepare, walk me through, can you do anything in the contract to make it a little bit more enticing to sell to a company?
There's definitely a couple of things that we did or things that I learned after that I could have done to make your company a little bit more appealing to sell and create a little bit more value. So the first one would be typically when you bring on a new client, you sign a 1-year contract and then it goes month to month after that. Right. As part of the agreement that we had with Turnkey, we got everyone to sign new 1-year commitments so that they weren't able to just give 30 or 60-day notices. Now, if they wanted to get out and they wanted to sell the property and they didn't like it, would they be able to get out? Of course. Again, those aren't the fights that we're in the management business are wanting to have. But it gave them some assurances that these people were committed at least for another year. Another thing is just getting your financials tight. And there's different types of financials. There's tax financials, and then there are your actual financials. And so you do not want to be showing a number of the things that we put into our tax returns as deductions because they are not real deductions, and you don't want to show low income when you're trying to sell the company. You want to boost that. I would definitely work with either your CPA or even like an hourly CFO type of service to look over your financials, present the information correctly so that you are able to maximize the valuation of your company. And if you are in the position of acquiring companies and people have not done that, then that's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
It goes both ways there.
Yeah. Well, we didn't even talk about how you structured the deal. So we should talk about that before we dive into all that. So how was the deal structured? How did you guys structure and what valuation did you guys come up? How did you guys come up with the valuation?
Yes, there was a couple of suggested ways to structure. One was, hey, we'll just give you this amount up front for the transfer. We'll take over your name and everything, and we'll give you this amount of value. Going back in time, I probably would have gone that route, but I did not go that route for our deal. The second option was a payment per contract turned over and signed under Turnkey. That we came up with a specific valuation for each property. And then there was a third option, which is what I went with, which I would not recommend other people go with at this point, but maybe it's a good one if you are acquiring companies, is they offered me a higher amount, paid 50-50, 50 up front and 50% after a year, based on the amount of contracts we were able to turn over and the amount of contracts that were still under management after a year. So I was like, look, these people have been with us for a very long time, blah, blah, blah. I think we transferred over like close to 35 properties. At the end of 1 year, 2 were still left with the company.
Oh my.
So I got screwed at that point because, again, they weren't set up in this market. And again, my clients had a high expectation of boutique service that they were not able to get. And so they would call me and be like, Adam, is it really going to screw you if I leave? And the first couple, I was like, no, do what you got to do. And then by the end, I was like, yeah, I'm already screwed. So do what you got to do. So that's the lesson that I learned, that no matter how much you study contracts, like it can't prepare you for. You learn by doing. So
Yeah, so that's actually one of the things I really admire about you, is that you care about the best interest of those clients, even though it screws you, but you're still like, you know what? Like, I rather the net positive be there for you because it has to make sense for you and not just for me. So you're not trying to convince them to stay on to crappy service. Now, granted, you did say you learned a lot. Let's go back to those learnings. What are the things that you learned through this transaction?
yeah, I think overall it's always good to, when you're working with something or doing a sale or something, to hope for the best case scenario, but you have to expect the worst case scenario to happen. And so I would have made a lot more money if I would have just taken the money, always take the money up front. And most deals that I've heard about where people rely on something happening, payouts over a year, 3 years, 5 years, it always ends up in either disappointment or with litigation. And I'm a member of Entrepreneurs Organization, and so I've now had the ability to hear similar war stories from a number of people who've sold their companies, and everyone is pretty much under the same opinion, is take the money up front.
Wow, that's crazy. But here's the thing, for the buyer, it makes more sense to spread that risk, right? Because you never know. Now,
They ended up
I know.
paying way less.
Sorry?
They ended up paying way less. They probably paid more than they should have based on only having 2 contracts left. But that's not my fault. That's theirs.
That's their fault. But you're relying on them. At that point, it's like it was performance based, right? So it was like a seller holdback with performance based metrics in place, which I think kind of screws you in the end, because you're relying on this external company that has no knowledge of Palm Springs to do a good job. Now, that's crazy. I love that you have this experience, because I think that's a lot of people don't. It's hard to find people that have had that kind of experience, especially that early on in 2018. Now, what was the multiple that you sold at, if I may ask?
So it wasn't even based on our income. It was based on a per property, just per contract transferred over.
Got it.
And to be honest, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was, I think, between it wasn't huge. It was maybe like 5,000 to 10,000 per property. And again, it's split up between the 50% there. Yeah, that's how the valuation was done at the time.
Yeah. I think another thing that your sale taught me, because we've talked about this as well in the past, one thing that I took away from that conversation was, and I've gotten that validated multiple times over, is that the big players, like, people don't want to sell to the big players. Because the big players, unless there's a big lump sum and they're taking it, but you almost feel like a sellout. I'm not saying you are a sellout by any means, because you told everybody to do what's best for them. But at the same time, you could potentially put your owners that you've built trust with all these years in a position where they're with this company that's not really going to carry your legacy correctly. And that's a risk. It's hard. It's a hard thing to do. I think that's why the little guy comes in, where it's somebody that's really passionate, that understands the market, maybe would have been a better fit in that situation, and was able to take these clients and do right by the clients and make them more money if possible. So I think that's a really unfortunate learning lesson, but I'm glad that you were able to share that with me, is what I'm saying. So
Yeah, definitely. And there's always the debate between the mom and pop and the more corporate. The problem is that anytime you're on a demo for a software or something, you get sold.
I'm
And
sure.
so, like, we got sold that we're this scrappy startup and we're
Gotcha.
this and we're that. We have this technology platform, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's got that. Again, it wasn't necessarily a great fit.
Yeah. But the thing is, you still built an incredible management company in 2011 is when you started, which is crazy to me. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, I love your stories. It's great. Now, granted, with this transaction, everything that went with it, is there anything, let's say that you're consulting me, for instance, with property management in general. What are some of the advice or tips or tricks you would give to somebody like me that's like growing or scaling my management company? Let's talk about that. Let's do like a little back and forth. I'm curious. I know we've done this before, but I
Yeah.
want everyone listening to have a little in on what we were talking about.
Yeah, and I think the biggest one is client control, and it's always the hardest at the beginning when you're first starting out. It's just shocking how many douchebags there are out there in the world, and those that acquire properties and have these insanely high expectations. And so I always say, like, 90% are cool, the 10% are a pain in the dick, and
Yeah.
you got to fire them and fire them quick. Because you will never make them happy. They will always be miserable, and they always expect these things. So anytime you've come to me as, hey, I've got this problem, I'm like, fucking fire it and move on. Again, I'm like, it's just not going to work with us. The level of
Yeah.
what you're expecting is not matching, and what we have. So that's always at the beginning. It's so hard because if you have 5 clients and you've got 2 bad ones, like, I'm telling you, fire them and then find more people, because you are going to be wasting your time, wasting your effort. They always cost me more money than they ever made me because of all the time and effort and pictures, and they're never happy. They always want money back. So that's the biggest thing. You
That'll
tell me,
drain you more.
what are some issues that you're dealing with, and I'll tell you what I think. I'm always straight to the point.
Yeah.
with that.
I think it's interesting. I actually had a really interesting. We already resolved it, but I definitely know you'd be really good at this because you always give me the straight up advice for this kind of stuff. But we had a really tough owner. For sake of this, I'm not going to mention their name or anything like that. But pain in the butt, like just such a pain in the butt. Everybody on our team was sick of him, and just we needed to get rid of him. Like that, there's no other option. He had a 6-month contract, and then it was year after that, and his demands were just out of this world. He kept coming in saying, okay, we want a 4-season experience. And what happened, and I'm curious what you would do in this situation, because it's funny, because I have an idea, but I'm curious, like there's a $5,000 break
And
clause.
forget my assistant.
And as your assistant, for anybody that's listening on the audio, there's Adam's kid is just like sitting on his lap. So, but basically he had a $5,000 break clause, and we told him that I think it's better for you to self-manage, and we can ride out this term because it's month 4 and it's not working, and month 6 is coming up, and he was like, no, I want to leave now, immediately, and I want you to forego the $5,000 because you guys were breaching because you guys are just not doing your job. That's what he said. What would you do, Adam?
In that case, I would say goodbye. Thank you.
Goodbye. Would you withhold $5,000 from him?
Probably not. It depends. So if he was really being a pain and he caused me a lot of issues, I might hold it for a bit just to fuck with them. But realistically, is $5,000 at the end of the day worth the fight, worth the continued aggravation? Probably not. And I've told you this before, $5,000
Yep.
doesn't make or break anything. It's get out of my life. Let me concentrate on the positive. Let me
Yep.
grow the business. Let me do all these things. Goodbye, and you are now someone else's problem.
So here's the backstory. He has been a very big pain in the butt. Our team doesn't like him. He thinks he can bully us out of it. and he comes in and says we're not abiding to the contract, and just starts listing like 2 or 3 things that we're breaching contract for.
Yeah.
So he's being a smartass now.
Mm-hmm.
So now with that in mind, he's being a smartass. We have, oh, by the way, we have a lot of money on the books for him. We've crushed it for him. All 5-star reviews.
Yeah.
A lot of money on the books for him. And he's going to take that with the listing, because he gets to keep the listing. So he gets to keep all those bookings. And he knows that. So he wants to keep all that hard work that we did.
Yeah. In that case, yeah, again, you might just.
It might be worth it, just saying now.
It might be worth it. Just you gave me a hard time. Now you're going to get a hard time. And the one thing that I will say is I hate bullies. And so if someone is bullying me, I will bully them right back. Very aggressively. And so that seems like a great case to have some fun bullying back. So yeah, maybe I'll play around with them. At the end of the day,
Who cares?
it's 5,000, and then
Your sanity is more
the thing with me is I'm an attorney, so like I can usually represent myself. And someone sends me a demand letter, I usually send a smart ass one back with a bunch of jokes in it, just because it's fun. But I don't recommend other people get in that game if not necessary.
Yeah, I think what we did was we gave him a response that was extensive, a very extensive response with saying, these are all the places where we crushed it for you. Here are all the claims that you've made and how they're all wrong.
Yeah.
Let's go to arbitration. We're ready. And he was just like, all right, I'm leaving. You guys can withhold the 5,000. Like that was his response.
And you won.
And we won. And he was just like, he didn't want to deal with it. But he wanted to bully us into it. He thought he could get away with it. And actually, that's why because you told me to do something along those lines in a previous like real estate transaction, I believe. And I think that kind of stayed with me. And I was like, no, let's fight this one through. He's just trying to bully us. Let's just win this. And we won it. And so all of our work paid itself back. We would have been able to make that $5,000 in those 2 months holding his property. But at the same time, we got the 5,000 without having to do any of the hassle of dealing with him, which was great. It was a win situation. So
that's awesome.
There's that. Now let's talk about client acquisitions. How would you acquire more clients?
It was a little different back then than it is now. I did a lot of acquisition through personal referral. And again, I could have probably grown the company a lot faster if I had a bigger marketing budget. If I was growing the company now in my life compared to then when I was scrappy and still paying off my student loans, like it would be a very different company. But one of the other things that I did, which I think was probably the most interesting, was that my vacation rental management company became an arm of the brokerage, right? So I'm a vacation rental manager. Hey, you want to get in the market? I'm a manager. I'm going to help you find a great property. Boom, brokerage on the buy side. Now they're in the vacation rental management. Okay, they've done this for 2 years. Now they want to sell. Boom, now we list the property. And so for me, it was a double dip, and it was a mechanism to be able to do more real estate transactions, which helped build up the real estate brokerage and allowed me to get bigger payments up front. So, okay, I'm managing your house for 2 years and we make, 30 grand. Cool. I just made 70 grand on the acquisition and sale of that property.
Wow. That's so smart. So you double or triple dipped every single time.
A lot of times. Now, and if we were good, people would buy 2 or 3 properties. We had people who had 5, 6, 7 properties within our portfolio. So
it actually made sense to, even if people left, like you still got the back end.
Or the front end of acquire the property. Like, oh, this isn't working out from a management perspective. Great. But we help them find the property. So that's where a lot of our from was through our brokerage.
Would you contribute the management as part of the growth for your brokerage?
Yes, very much. And even afterwards, even after I sold the company, my whole thing at the beginning, because I like working with investors more so than just residential, was I will help you. I built and sold this vacation rental company. I will help you find a great vacation rental. I better than any realtor in this market can tell you what it will produce and why you should buy this one, because it's got the right bedroom count, it's got the right size, it's got the pool facing in the right way, it has the right amenities. That allowed me to really build that side of it.
Yeah. Do you think that you lose focus when you have 2 different things happening at once, though? Is there a lack
100%.
of
That is pure ADD. That is not recommended for 95% of people. But if I just did the property management, it would be like a law. It would just get boring to me. And I'm like, what's next? And that's why I'm into development. That's why I'm into capital raising. That's why I'm what's next. And you have to know who you are as a person and find something that fits that it is way too difficult to change who you are. Like if you're not an entrepreneurial person, get a job, right? If you
Right.
are miserable in a job, try this entrepreneurship shit out. And you're like, oh, this is even worse. Go back to a job. Like
Yeah.
knowing who you are and what drives you is way more important than finding out what is the hot thing at the time or the cool thing, right? Find out who you are. Like I'm not adversarial. I'm not going to be a great lawyer in that regard. I'm very collaborative. I'm great at putting deals together. So that is what I do.
But do you think the law background has helped you in real estate?
100%. One, just being a
What way?
young person, it gives you legitimacy. First and foremost. So being a 25-year-old, 26-year-old person advising 50 or 60-year-olds about investments, or what the fuck? Oh, at least he's a lawyer. He probably knows something, even though I didn't necessarily. And then just, again, understanding contracts. But the biggest helpful thing, which non-lawyers don't know that I know, is in that situation that you were just talking about, what is a real threat for like litigation and what is just bullshit and posturing, because people try to do that to me all the time and I'm like, all right, we'll file suit, I'll see you in court. They never do.
Yeah.
It's never worth it. They'll pay a lawyer to write a letter, but they're not going to pay a lawyer to go to court for them, because that's a $20,000 retainer and we have $15,000 at stake. So let's just talk about it or fuck off.
Yeah, I love that. So that gives you a lot of power, right? Because I think that's
A
one of
lot
the
of
scariest
power.
things about business is people, oh, somebody's going to sue me or something's going to happen. Anything litigation is like scary. When really it's just, I've realized that it's just hiring the right professionals if it's a serious matter, really, for
And
that
it's all the
kind of.
economics. If it costs more to enforce something than is at stake, it will never be enforced.
So just for people that are listening, so they could get some knowledge on that, just a little tidbit. What would you find as something that's threatening for court versus something that's not?
So I would say 95% of things that I've encountered in my career are not threatening or scary to me legally. And that's a lot of my agents are just like, oh, really? That's not something that I have to worry about? I'm like, no, it's not anything. So I'd say the vast majority. Where you really, when you can get into some stuff is like errors in a real estate transaction in terms of advisement, and someone buys a house and it's got black mold and they're going to sue everyone under the sun, and there's hundreds of thousands of damages and health issues and things like that. That's the kind of stuff that you need to be scared of. Any given interaction with a client or thing, or a property stay, where even if there's damage, like that's what insurance is for. What you're gonna do? Say there's $100,000 of damage. I had cases where people trashed the house maybe 3 or 4 times in thousands of rentals. But even then, it's just like, all right, I've got insurance. I've got errors and omissions insurance. I've got these things like, okay, like here's my deductible. Defense attorneys, you do it. Like as long as you're properly insured and you're properly protected, 99% of things outside of like deliberate harmful things that you have done will probably not be an issue.
That's reassuring. What about errors and emissions insurance? Do you recommend it? Or really? Because we are actually in the midst of that right now, getting insurance, and errors and emissions and general liability kind of cross paths. I'm like, I don't know if we really need it. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What's your thought on that?
So the distinction between them is that because you are a real estate professional, you have a higher duty of care to your clients. If you were just a guy running a business and you have an auto shop or something else, and there's not this licensure with educational requirements, general liability is probably going to be fine. But if someone sues you for doing something under your license, then your general liability is going to say that's errors and omissions coverage. We're not going to defend it. And your errors and omissions is going to say to your general liability, we're not going to, and let them fight that out. But you should definitely have both, because if you are a licensed individual, and most people who have these companies, you have to have it under a broker. The broker is required to carry errors and emissions insurance, but it has to be specific to the property management portion of the business.
There you go. Cool. Awesome. I think that's a really good rundown of everything, Adam. But I want to get into the last few questions here. One of them being, I don't know if do you read books?
I used to read a lot more books. Since I've had my assistant come in, it's been very difficult to concentrate.
I was going to say, I was gonna say,
I
and you
read
got
every book under the
ADHD.
sun when I first started.
Yeah. So let's just say a book from the past that you would recommend to people that are listening. It can be any kind of book. It doesn't have to be real estate related.
Yeah, well, I'll just talk about the book that inspired me to get into real estate. Really, it's Confessions of a Real Estate Entrepreneur by James Randall.
Never heard of that.
It's an more obscure one, but he started off as a lawyer and got into like real estate. And the way he just breaks things down and talks about deals, I still look at deals through the lens that he portrays in this.
Wow.
And I think he was one of the original guys to do the warehouse like outlet model, where you just take a warehouse and you like put a bunch of walls and now you have all these different stores, like even before like Amazon outlets and things, like early. And that's the way that my brain works, is thinking outside the box. How do you look at something and look at it differently than other people and create value there? So that's a huge book, especially anyone interested in putting deals together themselves, anyone interested in commercial. Confessions of a Real Estate Entrepreneur by James Randall.
Wow. I've never heard that in this podcast, so that's awesome. I thought you were about to say Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I was like, oh man, we've heard this quite a bit.
That guy's lost his mind too. Gary Kawasaki or whatever. Like,
Yeah. You think he lost his mind?
Oh yeah, he thinks like the whole world, like he's only investing in like gold and he thinks the whole U.S.
market's gonna crash every year.
Yeah, every year. So
yeah,
it's a great book. Though. It's a great book.
Yeah, it's a great book though. Let's say that you could start property management company today. Mm-hmm. Well, walk me through what your strategy would be to just domination in all of Palm Springs, Coachella Valley area.
Yeah. And so knowing what I know now, or if I was fresh?
Knowing what your brain right now, your start.
I would go after a few of the best high-end properties, offer to do them for free, and just put them in my portfolio. From there, you use those properties as your marketing. Get new owners to come in. It's like, oh shit, he does this estate. Like, wow, he's going to do mine. So, and then once you've built up the company from there and you use those marketing pieces, you say, okay, now it's time to charge for these, and they'll probably do it because you give them 3 years for free. Could you even get those? Maybe, because they might not want to do it, but that's how I would start. And then I would probably look for different angles into the market that other people aren't touching. So whether that's boutique hotel management or glamping or something unique or different, because again, what I always say is there's 5,000 residential real estate agents out here, which is why, I was like, okay, I'm going to do commercial. Found out I loved commercial. There's 10 high producing. So you got to go against the grain. Don't do what everyone else is doing. Go into something new to establish yourself. And then once you have the reputation, everything comes from that.
That's awesome. And then what's the future look like for Adam? What's Adam working on other than making more new assistants for himself?
Yeah, the 500 is for 500 million assets under management. I'll remember the 300 in a second, but maybe it's the 300 Spartans. But it's all about establishing your long-term goals and then just thinking every day, what can I do to contribute on a small way to end up in that goal in 10 years? And every goal that I've ever set in that way, I've been able to achieve.
Wow. And so what are you going to do to get to that goal? What are you working on currently in the next year to hit?
Yeah, so I just acquired 43,000 square feet of industrial space, which I was telling you also had 110 units to self-storage. It had 26,000 feet of vacancy, which caused the property to go into foreclosure. And during escrow, I signed a gym for that 26,000 square feet. So I closed it at 3.65 on the day I closed. Because I had the lease signed, it's probably worth 5.5, and we'll just go out from there once it starts cash flowing and we can get it up and going a little bit more. But doing deals like that, where it's you just finding holes in the market, using my skill set to fill those holes. Mm-hmm. And my next step will probably be to start a fund to get $3 to $5 million in dry powder to be able to go and acquire deals all cash and then redo them. So that's my next goal. Probably be looking for 100 to 200 total investors for that 3 to 5 million and take it from there.
Okay. If let's say somebody wants to either ask you a question, anything you talked about today, or be an investor with you for any of your deals in Palm Springs, the growing market. So how do people get in touch with you?
Best way is Instagram. Slide into those DMs, Adam Gilbert 13, or you can find find me on LinkedIn. Just type Adam Gilbert Palm Springs. You'll find my website, the firm Capital Group, the firm Companies, the firm Brokerage, the firm Property Management. Only commercial property management. No more vacation rentals for me.
No more.
You can find me on all the major platforms.
I think another thing that you do really well, because I'm going to plug you in here, is you literally have all the connections for boutique hotels in Palm Springs. I see so many influencers. I'm like, first Amanda Fernale and David Fernale, but also just like other people that are just like Sophie. She just bought a boutique hotel. I was like, that's definitely Adam. Yeah. Cool. So you do have a lot of boutique hotels in Palm Springs. If somebody else,
a lot of off markets also.
Off markets too. So that's incredible. But anyways, thank you so much, Adam. Appreciate you. Have a good day, all right?
All right, thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to the Patrick Real Estate Show. If you found this episode helpful, please give us a follow and leave us a 5-star review. Your support truly means a lot. And connect with Patrick in the show notes below. Until next time.